We continue now at the top of Daf Tube Aleph from Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 95a. On the previous summit, the Gemara had a contradiction in Brises. One Brisa said that in the times of Rebbe, there was a takana that we shouldn't accept. If a gazlan, or let's say somebody lent with ribbis, with interest, we shouldn't accept back when they return the gazela. We shouldn't accept it back from them when they return the interest, because then it's not going to encourage these thieves and these people who lend with interest. They're not going to be encouraged to do teshuvah. It might be very hard to do teshuvah if they have to return everything. On the other hand, we have another Brisa that seems to indicate that they do have to return the items, they do have to return the money, and we do accept it from them. And the Gemara is now making a distinction between when the actual item that was stolen is still around, or when the item is no longer around and they would pay back money. As the Gemara continues, Kan b'gzela kayemes. In one case, we're talking where the gzela, the item, is still around. As Rashi says, gzela kayemes chayev lahachzira. If the gzela, if the item is still around, so then it has to be returned. Kan b'shein gzela kayemes. In the other case, we're talking where the item is not around, the item that was stolen is no longer, therefore you just have to pay back money. That's where Rebbe made that takana, again, that we shouldn't accept these items back from the gazlan and from the person who lent beribis. As we mentioned on the previous Amud, there's a discussion to what extent was Rebbe's takana. Was it only in his generation? Was it beyond? That's a discussion within the Rishonim. In any case, the Gemara continues, Va'avne, but what about the belt that is mentioned in that very brisa where Rebbe made the takana? They mentioned the belt which was stolen. The gzela kayemesi, that seems to be talking about something where the item that was stolen is still around, and it was over there that they said that a takana was made not to accept it back from the gazlan. So how can you say that when the gzela is kayemes, that's when we do accept it back from the gazlan? And the Gemara says, my avnet, what does it mean when the brisa mentions the belt? To may avnet, it just means the value of the avnet. It doesn't mean the actual avnet. It was no longer around. But the Gemara still asks, anytime that the gzela is around, the Rabbanan didn't make that takana. But what about the case of the beam? Let's say a person steals a beam and then builds it into a building. The gzela kayemesi, there the gzela is still around, we still can see that beam. Utnan, yet we learned in the Mishnah, al hamorish hagazel shebanu bebira, that if you have this stolen beam that's built into a building, sheyitol damav mipnei takonas hashavim, so there you have to pay back money. We don't make the gazlan give back the actual beam. We say that he doesn't have to knock down the whole building and give the beam, he can just give the money. So there we do have a takana. Apparently we're making some kind of takana even where the gzela is kayemes. And the Gemara says to that, Shani Hasam, it's different over there. To Kevan de Ikap Seida Debira, since there would be a loss to the entire building if you have to knock it down, Shavi Rabbanan Kedelesa, the Rabbanan consider it as if the Marish is no longer around. That's why it's possible to make a takana. Rashi says, Misham Pseida Debira Shavi Rabbanan Kedelesa, because of the loss of the building, the Rabbanan say it's like it's not around. Umihu Dami Boy Lahadure, Rashi notes, but the money does have to be returned. Hoel Ugzela Kayemes Bebir, because at the end of the day, the item that was stolen is still there, it's in the building, so the takana over there is that you don't return the actual beam, but you have to return the money. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Gazal para me'uberes v'yolda v'chulu. The case in the Mishnah was a person stole a cow that was pregnant, then it gave birth. So the halacha is that the person has to give back the cow, and he has to give back according to the value it was when it was a pregnant cow, according to what it was worth at the time that he actually stole it. And the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Hagozel rachel v'gazazav. Somebody steals a sheep and then he shears off the wool, or para v'yolda, he steals a cow and then the cow gives birth. Mashalem osav v'yes gizoseh, he pays back the animal and also the shearings, v'yes valdoseh, also the offspring. In other words, he has to pay back everything, including the benefits. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir does not seem to be saying shinoi kona here, because Rabbi Meir is saying you have to pay back not what it was at the time of the gazela, even though there was a change, there was a physical change over here. Generally, we would say shinoi kona, and you only pay the value of what was stolen at the time it was stolen. Here, Rabbi Meir is saying that's not the case. You have to pay back what it is right now. You have to pay back the animal and the shearings, the animal and the offspring. Rabbi Yehuda says gazela choseres be'ene. Rabbi Yehuda says that the actual item that was stolen, it just goes back as is. We'll take a look at Rashi in a moment. Rabbi Shimon says rowan osa ki'ilu hishuma etzlo bekesef. We view it and we make an evaluation in terms of money, what it was worth at the time that it was actually stolen. And Rashi explains, again, that's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. You have to pay back everything, what it was at the time that it was stolen, plus all of the ways in which it improved. Then we have the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that Gezela Choseres Be'ene, that the actual item returns as is, Kemos She'achshav Reikonis, meaning as it is right now empty, meaning you've already sheared off all the wool, it already gave birth. Yachzireni, you should return it as like that. V'hadar Mishalim Demei Gizos V'ubor Kemo Shaya B'Shas HaGezela. Now it doesn't only mean to return the cow, but you also have to give back now the value of what it was worth as a pregnant cow, so you have to add a little bit of money. But you don't have to worry about any improvement that happened during the time while it was at the Gazlan. You just have to return it according to what it was at the time of the actual Gezela. Again, you don't have to pay back the improvement because of the offspring, just what it was worth at the time of the Gezela. So now you're returning the cow. The cow is no longer pregnant. You have to add the value of what it was worth when it was pregnant. You have to pay back at least the value what it was at the time of the Gezela. And Rashi explains, because no one would say that thieves can pay less than what it was at the time of the Gezela. That's not even going to be an option. So essentially, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that they pay kashas HaGezela. And then we had the opinion of Rabbi Shimon of Rowan Osa Ki'ilu Hishuma Etzel B'Kesef. We have to look at it. We have to do an evaluation. Mishas HaGezela, says Rashi, from the time at the time that it was stolen. U'Mishalim Damim Kashas HaGezela. Seems to be the same as Rabbi Yehuda. You pay the money according to the time it was stolen. Well, the Kamon Mefarish b'mai pligi Rabbi Yehuda of Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara later on will explain what exactly is the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. So in any case, you have two basic opinions over here. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is really one opinion that you pay kashas HaGezela, and Rabbi Meir is saying no, you pay what it is right now, including the offspring that were born now, including all of the improvements, including the shearings that may have grown while it was in the hands of the gazlan of the thief. And the Gemara continues. They had the following question: my time made Rabbi Meir. What exactly is the reason of Rabbi Meir? Why does Rabbi Meir seem to be saying over here that shinoi is not kona? Is it mishum dekasavar shinoi b'makomo omed? Is it because he holds the shinoi is as if nothing happened? In other words, we don't say shinoi kona; it's not considered to be significant. That's as we explained in Rabbi Meir initially. Odilma, or maybe bialma shinoi kona. Maybe Rabbi Meir holds that in general shinoi is kona. V'hacha knasuhu dekakonis, and maybe over here it is a fine that we are imposing. And Rashi explains, knasa konis shelo yehi chote niskar. We don't want this sinner, this thief, to profit. B'gzeila lito l'sashavach, that he should take the improvement, he should profit off of his thievery. That we don't want, and therefore Rabbi Meir imposes a fine. And the Gemara says, L'may nafkamina. Now, what is the difference between these two opinions of whether this is a knas or whether we're going to say shinoi is not kona? A very simple difference. Let's say you have a situation where the animal actually gets weaker, it gets thinner, it actually depreciates. So in that situation, if you're going to say that shinoi is not kona, so then you could actually just return the animal itself as is. You won't need to worry about what it was worth at the time of the gzela. But on the other end, if you say that really shinoi is kona, and so you owe what it was b'shas ha'gzela, it's just that we don't want the gazlan to take any improvements because we don't want him to profit. So here there's nothing to do with improvements. Here the animal actually depreciated. It got thinner, and therefore he would actually have to pay back money according to what it was worth at the time of the gazela. And the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here the following proof. This is from a Mishnah. Gazal behema v'hiskina, if he stole an animal and it aged, it got older. Avodim v'hiskinu, he stole slaves and they got older. Mishalim kashas ha'gazela, you pay like the time that it was stolen. The idea being shinoi is kona. Rabbi Meir says, Ba'avodim, when it comes to slaves, Omer lo hareshel chalafonecha, there he can actually just give back the slave as is. We don't say shinoi kona by avodim. And the reason for that is because Rabbi Meir here is considering the eved to be like karka. We don't apply shinoi kona by karka. We'll see Rashi in a moment. The point is within Rabbi Meir, v'ilu behema, whereas by an animal, by avodim, that's what Rabbi Meir says. But whereas by an animal, kashas ha'gazela, apparently we would say that you pay back kashas ha'gazela, and we would say shinoi is kona. So that's what the Gemara says. Now, if you're going to say, if it enters your mind that Rabbi Meir holds the shinoi is insignificant, so afilu behemanami, so by the animal also you should just return the animal as is. Elalav, rather, is it not shmami no kasav Rabbi Meir shinoi kona? You see that Rabbi Meir really does hold shinoi is kona. And here, Rabbi Meir is just imposing a fine. And Rashi explains, Ba'avodim omer lo hareshel chalafonecha, by slaves he can say, take back what is yours as is. The avda k'mekarkoi dami, again as we said, an eved is considered like land. The karka hadra b'yeina, and land is just returned as is. Ve'ena nigzeles liknos legazlan b'shinoi v'lios b'reshu. So it's not something that the gazlan makes a kinyan on, and the shinoi therefore causes it to be in his reshus. That is not the case. And the Gemara continues, Amri, the sages respond to this argument. It could be Rabbi Meir l'divreim d'Rabbanan ka'amar lahu. Maybe the Rabbi Meir is just responding according to the view of the Rabbanan, meaning it's not really what he himself holds. It could be what Rabbi Meir is saying is as follows. Lididi, according to me, shinoi ain't kona. Really, shinoi is not kona. Ve'afilu b'heimanami, and therefore the animal also, even the animal, you can return as is. But according to you, the Amrizu Shinoi Kona, that you say Shinoi is Kona, Oduli Mihas Be'avda Dechimekarkoi Dami. At least you should admit to me that Avodim are considered like land, the Karka Ein an Exelis. And again, as Rashi just said, Karka is not something that can be stolen. The Kinyan does not apply when it comes to Karka. At least admit that by Avodim. The Amri Le Rabbanan, and then the Rabbanan responds, Rabbi Meir, lo, no, Avda Kemetaltali Dami. Really, Avodim are considered like movable objects because Avodim actually move around. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here, another proof. This is also from a Mishnah. Let's say a person gives his wool over to somebody who's supposed to dye the wool. He wants the person to dye the wool red, and instead the person makes a mistake. He dyes the wool black. Or shachar v'tzavo edom, let's say it's black. He was supposed to dye it black, and instead he dyed the wool red. So it says in this Mishnah, Rabbi Meir says, no sin lo demate smaro. He pays him only the value of the actual wool. He doesn't have to take into account the higher value, the fact that it was already dyed wool, and that's what the Gemara says, demate smaro in. It sounds like it's only the value of the wool that he owes, but demate smaro v'shivchalo, he doesn't have to pay back the value of the wool plus what it was worth because it improved. And so the Gemara says, and if it should enter your mind that Rabbi Meir holds Shinoi is not Kona, so the smaro shivcho, he should have to give him back the wool plus the improvement. He should give him back the wool as is. It is now dyed wool, and therefore that's what he should get. Rather, isn't it true that we see Kasav Rabbi Meir Shinoi Kona, that Rabbi Meir holds that the Shinoi is Kona, and that's why in this particular case we're not going to impose a fine because he didn't do it on purpose. He just dyed it the wrong color. So in this particular case, the Shinoi is Kona. He only owes him the value of what it was when he was given the wool. And again here above, when we brought Rabbi Meir, it's just a fine that Rabbi Meir is imposing. And the Gemara says, Shema Mina, indeed, we see that this is the case. Again, we see that Rabbi Meir holds really Shinoi is Kona. And the Gemara continues, Ika Diamri, there are those that have a different version of the above discussion. Haloi Boilan, this wasn't a question for us whether Rabbi Meir holds Shinoi Kona or not. Mida'apich Rav v'tani, because Rav actually reverses the Tanoim in the Mishnah we quoted above, and he learns as follows. Gazal Parav v'hiskina, the Mishnah said again, if he steals a cow and it gets older, again it depreciates. Avodim v'hiskina, he steals slaves, and they get older, they depreciate. So the way that Rav has it is Meshalim Kashas HaGazela Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is the one that holds that the person has to pay back according to what it was worth at the time of the Gezela. Clearly, according to Rav, Rabbi Meir holds that Shinoi is Kona. The Chachamim say, Ba'avadim, when it comes to slaves, Omer lo hareshel chalafanecha. So there again, he says, take what is yours, take it as is, because again, by Avadim, they're considered like Karka in this version according to the Chachamim. And so therefore we see from that, V'adai le Rabbi Meir Shinoi Kona, it is clear for certain that Rabbi Meir holds Shinoi is Kona. V'hachan over here, when Rabbi Meir said that the Gazlan is not able to keep the improvements, so Kanasahu de Kakanisle, that's just a fine that's being imposed on the Gazlan. He shouldn't profit from his sin. And so what is the question within Rabbi Meir? Kika iboilan, what is our question? Hachi iboilan. Our question is as follows. Kika kanis b'mezid. Is it that Rabbi Meir is only imposing the fine in a situation where it was done on purpose? Aval b'shogeg lo kanis. But let's say it happened by mistake. He would not impose such a fine. Odilmor maybe afila b'shogeg nami kanis. Maybe even in a situation where it was by mistake, he would also impose the fine. And Rashi explains b'shogeg, what would be an example of shogeg? Kagon lokeach shalokach migazlan. Let's say, for example, a lokeach, someone bought it from the Gazlan, v'ishbicha, and then it improved. V'lo yada shehi gazula, he didn't realize that it was stolen. So in that case, would he impose the knas or not? And the Gemara continues, Tashma, come in here a proof to this question from the following Brisa. Chamisha govin min hamechurorin. There are 5 cases where we only collect from what's called free property. You can't collect from property that has a lien on it. Let's say the person you're collecting from sold his property to somebody else. Now it's in the hands of the purchasers. That's called property that you're collecting that has a lien on it. That you can't do in the following 5 cases. V'elohein, and these are the following cases. Peiros v'shevach peiros. Let's say the person is collecting the fruits. He's owed the produce use of a certain property or the improvement from that property. You can't collect that from the chasim mishubadim. You can't collect that from property with a lien. V'hamekabel olav lozun ben ishto ubas ishto, somebody who accepts upon himself to support the son of his wife or the daughter of his wife, that can't be collected from property with a lien. V'get chov she'ein bo achrayis, if you have in general a shtar that in the shtar is not written the idea of achrayis, of responsibility, meaning the lien is not written into the shtar. And finally, uchsubas isha she'ein bo achrayis. Let's say you have a ksuba of a wife, and again, it's not written into that ksuba that you can collect from property with a lien. And so the Gemara now says, Man shamad le damar achrayis lav to'os soferu. Who's the one that holds that if you leave the achrayis out of the shtar, that's not considered just a mistake of the scribe? There are those that say that you don't have to write the achrayis, you don't have to write the lien into the shtar. We assume it in every shtar. But who's the one that's not saying like that? Who's the one that says that if it's left out, it's not considered to be a scribal error? Rather, it's considered that there is no lien on the property. That happens to be the opinion of Rabbi Meir. That's Rabbi Meir, so we know this price is Rabbi Meir. V'katani, and yet what does it say over here? It says peiros v'shevach peiros. It talks about collecting fruits, and it talks about collecting the improvement of those peiros. So shevach peiros hechidami. What exactly is the case of shevach peiros? Kagon shagaz al sada mechaver. The case could be as follows: a person steals a field from his friend, umechar al acher. Then he sells that field. The gazlan sells that field to someone else. V'shbicha, and then the field improves. V'harehi yotza mitachas yado, and here it is in his possession. Kishehu gova, when he collects. And Rashi explains, Min ha-mechuror, and again, you're collecting only from free property, min ha-chasim b'nei chor, and again, free property, v'lo min ha-chasim mishubadim, not from property with a lien. There are 5 cases. The first cases are peiros, v'shevach peiros, fruits, and the improvement of the fruits. Tanan b'Meseches Gittin, we learned in the Mishnah in Gittin, ein motzian la'achilas peiros v'l'shevach karkos, min ha-chasim mishubadim. Again, you can't take, in terms of peiros, the consumption of peiros, and in terms of the improvement of the land, you cannot take from property with a lien. The reason for that is it's a way of improving the situation, because we don't want purchasers to lose out on that property. Achilas peiros v'shevach karkos mefarish lo b'shnayim ochzin. What exactly achilos peiros is and shevach karkos? That's explained in Meseches Bava Kamma perek shnayim ochzin. Get chov shtar chov. In other cases, again, you have just a document she'ein bo achrayis, where there's no lien written into the document. Shelo shibed lo lova b'shas halvos nechasav. It wasn't written in there that the lova gave over, put a lien on his property at the time of the loan. It wasn't written into the shtar that all of my property, there's now a lien on this property to you to pay off this debt. And so again, the Gemara said, Lavto Soferu, who is this Tana who holds that if you leave that out of the shtar, it's not considered to be a scribal error, but we really say there is no lien. Ve'eno gov min chasim mishubadim. Who's the Tana that says you would not collect from the chasim mishubadim in this case? V'lo amrinon ein lachadam hamalve ma'osa below shibud nechsei lova. We don't say that there's no such thing as a person who lends his money without that shibud. V'hasofer ta, and that the scribe just made an error. V'lo kasab b'achrais, he just didn't write the lien in there. Eladavka is lien on basar shtar. But no, we follow exactly what's written in the shtar. If there's no achrayis in the shtar, then there's no collecting from the lien property. And who's the one that says that? It happens to be Rabbi Meir b'shnayim ochzin. Rabbi Meir says that in Babba Metzia. Mazah shtar chov ein behen achrayis nechasim yachzir. If he finds shtar chov and it's not written in there achrayis nechasim, he returns it. Lafisha ein bezin ifrain mehen, because that's not something again that bezin collects in that fashion, as we said. Kishehu gova. So then when he collects, meaning to say as follows. Halokeach chozer al gazlan. The lokeach now is able to go back to the gazlan. What happened over here was the gazlan stole the property. He then sold it to a lokeach. Now that property went back to the real owner because this person was a gazlan. And so now the lokeach wants to go back to the gazlan and get his money back. Shanigzal bav enotel sadeu kimos shehu. Because the person who it was originally stolen from, he has now taken back his field as it is. V'halokeach chozer al gazlan shemechar lo b'achrayas. And now the lokeach is going back to the gazlan because it was sold to him with achrayas. The gazlan took responsibility, and so now the nigzal wants to get paid back, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Hey Amud Beis.